Introduction to Immunity. Imagine that the human body is like a country, and the cells are the individual people that live in the country. Groups of cells may form organs, just like people may form social groups like sporting clubs or occupations. Pathogens are foreign bodies that cause disease, similar to how criminals cause disorder and damage. Our body has evolved to protect us from pathogens, as far as possible with the help of a system called the immune system, through a process called immunity. At the end of this lesson, you will be able to define innate immunity, explain the first line defense mechanism, describe the second line defense mechanism, define interferon, define active immunity, and define passive immunity. Immunity. First, let us know what innate immunity is. The immune system is the body's defense force, and is comprised of three distinct lines of defense. Immunity can be classified as innate immunity and adaptive immunity. Innate immunity is the non-specific type of defense, consisting of all the defense elements with which an individual is born, and which are always available to protect the living body. One strategy of innate immunity is to prevent the entry of foreign agents by providing certain barriers. This forms the first line of defense. Another strategy is to quickly kill and throw out the agents that have entered the body. When the first line of defense fails, this forms the second line of defense. Now, let us focus on the first line of defense system. It consists of physical and physiological barriers. Physical barriers are classified into mechanical barriers, reflexes, and chemical barriers. The skin of our body is the main mechanical barrier. Its tough outer layer prevents the entry of microorganisms or any other particles. The mesh of fine hair in our nostrils filters the particles from entering the respiratory system. The mucus that coats the epithelium of the respiratory and urinary tract traps the particles. The cilia of the epithelial cells move the mucus out, along with the trapped particles and microbes. HCl in the stomach clears the particles from entering our body. Physiological barriers that contribute to innate immunity are the body temperature, pH, and various soluble secretory products of the mucosa. The oil and sweat secreted by the skin glands make the surface of the skin acidic, that is, pH 3 to 5. This acidity discourages many microorganisms from establishing contact with the skin. Lysozyme is an enzymatic substance present in certain secretions of our body, like the tear, sweat, saliva, etc. It destroys the cell wall of bacteria and kills them. Thus, lysozyme of tear prevents eye infection, and that in saliva attacks the bacteria in the food. The acid component of gastric juice kills the bacteria that survive till the food is swallowed. So far, we have learnt the first line of defense. After the quiz, we will know more about the second line of defense in detail. Second line of defense mechanisms. When the barriers of the first line of defense are broken by a cut or abrasion on the skin, the second line of defense comes into play. It consists of cellular, inflammatory, and cytokine barriers. First, we will know more about cellular barriers. It includes two types of cells. They are phagocytes and natural killer cells. Phagocytes are involved in the non-specific defense of the body. They include the following cell types: brain, microglial cells; lungs, alveolar macrophages; liver, Kupffer cells; kidneys, mesangial phagocytes; lymph nodes, resident and recirculating macrophages; spleen, macrophages or phagocytes; blood, monocytes; joints, synovial cells; bones, osteoclasts, nerves, astrocytes, and adipose tissue, macrophages. These cells engulf the microbes and other agents through phagocytosis and kill them. Monocytes originate in the bone marrow, circulate in the blood for 1 or 2 days, migrate to the connective tissue, and form macrophages. WBC is responsible for the immune role. Eosinophils are responsible for allergic responses. Basophils are responsible for the secretion of histamine and serotonin. Neutrophils are responsible for phagocytosis and destroy foreign organisms. They have a multilobed nucleus and granular cytoplasm. Lymphocytes are responsible for immune responses. Monocytes are responsible for phagocytosis and secrete chemokines. Agranulocytes. Lymphocytes and monocytes are known as agranulocytes, since they lack granules in their cytoplasm. And neutrophils and monocytes are more active phagocytic white blood cells. The next cellular barrier is natural killer cells. They kill the virus-infected cells and certain tumor cells of the body by creating perforin-lined pores in the plasma membrane of these target cells. These pores allow entry of water into the target cells, which swell up and burst. The next important barrier is the inflammatory barrier. This involves the secretion of chemicals like histamine and prostaglandins from the mast cells. Basophils also release serotonin, histamine, and the natural anticoagulant heparin. They are not phagocytic cells. Mast cells are long-lived, but basophils are short-lived. Mast cells are very close to basophils. In response to histamine, the blood vessels around the wound dilate and become more permeable. This causes redness, swelling, and heat associated with the injury. The phagocytes leak into the interstitial spaces and engulf the invading microbes, and also clean up the cell debris. As a result, pus is formed, which is a collection of dead cells and body fluids. There is a generation of heat, which results in a fever. The toxins released by the pathogens, or the compounds called pyrogens, released by the leukocytes, keep the body temperature high. A moderate fever, or slightly higher temperature of the body, helps in the defense mechanism in 2 ways. By stimulating the phagocytes to act more intensely, and by inhibiting the growth of the microbes. But a very high body temperature is dangerous, and has to be brought down quickly, by the use of antipyretics, or application of cold packs. The last important barrier, in the second line of defense mechanism is cytokines barriers. Many substances, such as interferon, interleukin, and growth factors, which are secreted by certain cells of the immune system, have an effect on other cells. Neutrophils promote adhesion to the endothelium, attract other neutrophils, monocytes, and eosinophils, and dilate capillaries by secreting cytokines. Interferons, which are the glycol proteins secreted by virus-infected cells, act by sending signal neighboring cells to put up barriers, sending signal infected cells to die, and recruitment of WBC to stimulate long-lasting immunity. Interferons are effective in treating measles, influenza, hepatitis, and to some extent, certain cancer types. Now, let us move on to the third important part, which is immunity. Immunity can be described as either active or passive, depending on how it is acquired. Active immunity results when exposure to a disease organism triggers the immune system to produce antibodies to that disease. Exposure to the disease organism can occur through infection with the actual disease, resulting in natural immunity, or the introduction of a killed or weakened form of the disease organism through vaccination, resulting in vaccine-induced immunity, or artificial immunity. Passive immunity is provided when a person is given antibodies to a disease, rather than producing them, through his or her own immune system. A newborn baby acquires passive immunity from its mother through the placenta. A person can also get passive immunity through antibody-containing blood products, such as immunoglobulin, which may be given when immediate protection from a specific disease is needed. Conclusion. From this discussion, it is clear that the frontline innate immune response is often powerful enough to eliminate the pathogens before the development of later phases of infections, which rely on acquired immunity for resolution. Summary. From this lesson, you have learned that immunity can be classified as innate immunity and adaptive immunity. Innate immunity is the non-specific type of defense, consisting of all the defense elements with which an individual is born, and which are always available to protect the living body. The first strategy of innate immunity is to prevent the entry of foreign agents by providing certain barriers. This forms the first line of defense. The second strategy is to quickly kill and throw out the agents that have entered the body. When the first line of defense fails, this forms the second line of defense. The first line of the defense system consists of physical and physiological barriers. The second line of defense system consists of the cellular, inflammatory, and cytokine barriers. And immunity can be described as either active or passive, depending on how it is acquired.